On our most recent trip to Japan, we found one guitar that really stood out from the rest, which is this guitar. At first glance, this is just a sunburst Strat. We get a lot of sunburst Strats, so what is so special about this one? This is a Fender Japan ST62115 with a JV serial. So what does all that mean? This is a 1982, which is the first year of Fender Japan production, ST62115, so 62 reissue Strat with a original retail price of 115,000 yen, which was the most expensive model for the year. Fender Japan, as well as a lot of other Japanese guitar companies, have a model tier system quite often, where they have a good, better, best. As Fender Japan was launched, they made no exception. Fender Japan would reissue both the 57 and 62 Strat. Each guitar would have a 65,000 yen tier, a 85,000 yen tier, and a 115,000 yen tier. As the price would go up, the specs would also improve. With the initial launch of guitars, all three model tiers would actually include USA pickups, but as you get into the nicer models, you get a lacquer finish and USA electronics throughout. By the time that you get to the ST115, which is this version, you pretty much have a Fender American Vintage, or at the time, US Vintage reissue Stratocaster, but made in Japan with mostly US parts. Fender Japan officially launched in March of 1982 when an agreement with the Kondo Shokai company and Fender was reached. Now, the Kondo Shokai company had been making Greco guitars in a Fender style right up until this point, and those Greco guitars also followed the same three model tier system of good, better, best. So when it came time to switch to making actual Fender guitars rather than just Fender style guitars, it was a very easy transition. If you want to learn more about the Greco guitars that predated Fender Japan, we actually did a whole video on those. So once you're done watching this video, we would love if you check that out, if that sounds like something you're into. Getting back to this guitar specifically, as I think it is so kind of historically relevant, being that it's the highest model tier from the first year of production, I want to just actually take this apart and kind of document all the parts in this guitar and show a little bit more about what this is. We don't do too many videos where we focus on just one guitar. We try to save it for stuff that's like really special. But if you enjoy this, definitely let us know, as there's certainly more guitars that we could do videos in this style. So I want to dig deeper into this guitar and kind of show you guys what we're looking at here. We found it at a shop, it wasn't even priced yet, and saw immediately that this was obviously an extremely early example of this guitar. And I could also just see from the way that the light was bouncing off the finish that this was clearly lacquer. Everything was looking really correct. One thing that helps identify these really early Fender Japan guitars is to look at the text placement of Made in Japan with respect to the Fender logo. And you'll also see a just slightly different Fender Spaghetti logo on these really early examples. Now, when the purchase was made, when we were looking at this at the shop, we actually took it apart in the store, which is not something you can typically do. But the shop that had this, I had a good rapport going with. I bought stuff from them a few times before. So when I showed interest, they immediately were like, we want to show you everything with this guitar because it is what it is. It's definitely not a cheap guitar. It is quite pricey for Fender Japan. Maybe even the most pricey guitar that we've ever acquired made by Fender Japan. It definitely warranted due diligence, but I still do want to take it apart again here today to get even more documentation. This guitar is not completely all original. It's close. There's a few small things, so we are going to look at that here. The biggest thing is that this currently has a 5-way switch. This would have originally had a 3-way switch from the factory. Very common modification. I think this is a very warranted modification, so I back it. I don't think it really takes away from the value of this guitar, as it makes it more playable and more usable. Because of that, it obviously calls into question to look at everything in the electronics, as that means that the solder points have been touched up. So let's dig in. Now that we have the strings off, the first thing I'm going to do is take the neck off, and we are going to check out the pencil date on the neck heel. Now, spoiler alert, like I said earlier, we did already take this apart at the shop when we looked at it, but it's very quick, so I know what's here, but I want to actually document it now. As you can see here, we have the JV serial on the back of the neck plate. Quite rare to see. We still have the blue sticker intact, which tells us the model tier, which very clearly denotes 115. I should note, when I was saying earlier, like, all of those observations were made before we were even able to take the guitar off the hanger. In Japan, it's not like in the States where you can just go grab a guitar off the wall at any shop and There you go. You have to ask for assistance. So we were just looking at this guitar, not touching it, seeing it on the wall. And so all we could go off of was what we could see from the front of the guitar, which, like I said, was pretty much just the placement of the MIJ Japan text, the finish. That was really all we had reference to before we started the conversation with the guys working at the shop. Now, just because you can't grab the guitar straight off the wall and start shredding, that does not mean that they don't want you to play the guitars. Literally everyone that we've interfaced with in these Japanese guitar shops has been super cool about letting us play guitars. So anytime we ask, they're always cool enough to pull the guitar down. They'll usually tune it up for you, get it going with an amp, and then you can enjoy it. There's been a number of times where I've been like, I don't need to plug it in. I just want to look at the guitar and review the condition. And that's actually kind of hard to get across. They either want to give you the full experience of, we're going to set you up with an amp and play it and see if you like it, or you just can look at it on the wall. That's just kind of a funny tangent there. We're getting really nerdy and nitty gritty here, but when looking at vintage guitars like this, I do always love to see, in a weird way, when there's like a scratch or a blemish that extends from one piece to another. As you see, it's kind of, there's a little scratch that goes from the neck plate down to the finish, and that can actually tell you a couple things. One is that those pieces have obviously been together for a while. They were together at the time that happened. So that's one piece of evidence that is probably original to each other. Now we have a lot of other evidence that all this matches up, but you know, it makes everything make sense when it's worn like that. And then you can also see that this is only a scratch in the finish, as it's also scratched on the neck plate. It's not like it's some sort of crack. That's not even a place where this would really crack if that was the case. But yeah, just another good indication. Like, yeah, it's just finish wear. It extends through this. It clearly got scratched or bumped there at some point in its life. This Stratocaster is over 40 years old at this point. It's obviously been played as it should be. It's an incredible guitar. So you'll see stuff like that. Kind of make sure they go back in the same holes. Got to keep that shim right where it needs to be. Just right here. Now, first we're gonna dig into the neck. Clear as day, there is a pencil stamp there, which is great, as all the time we will run into guitars that the pencil stamp has long faded away. But this reads 5/10/82. Now, you'd be quick to think that means May 10th, and it might. I haven't been able to find a clear answer on. I'm not sure if this is in Japan's typical format of day, month, or the opposite, like we have in the States. So it's either May or October. It's one of those. And you can see it's also dated 5/10 on the back here as well. Yeah, you also have a little N. So between the date stamp on the heel, date stamp here, and then this N here, that is all of the information that this neck has to offer us, at least as far as what is obstructed from view when it's on the guitar. Now we're gonna check out the body here. So the first relevant thing to note is this A stamp in the pocket. A would designate that this is the highest model tier for this time period. You'll see the middle model tier will say B, and then the entry level tier will say C. So the 6265 will say C, 6285 will say B, and then the 115 will of course say A. All right. Here we go. So taking a look at the pickups here, these are the Fender USA gray bobbin pickups. They're the same ones that you would see on the US vintage line that was being made in Fullerton at that moment. So that's really cool to see here. On 3 of these pots, we can see the date code fully, and on one of them, it is slightly obstructed by a blob of solder. One thing that was really funny with this is when we took it apart in the store and we were talking to the guys that work there, they noted at least 2 of the pots are original. They don't know on the other one. And I'm thinking, okay, that's not a big deal. Let's take a look. And on the 2-tone pots, it's very easy to see the 13782, which is CTS pot from 1982. You can see that very clearly on both of these. But then you can see 1378 and then a blob of solder on the volume pot. You can tell this is the same patina, same model, everything else as these other 2. I think it's pretty safe to assume the next number there is going to be a 2 making this also an 82 pot. Everything looks correct there. Taking a look in the cavities, there's not really anything in the way of other numbers or anything there. So nothing crazy to document. This just has a simple SSS routing. So no, you could not put a humbucker in this if you desired without routing it. Please don't route this guitar, as I think it's historically relevant. So as noted, the 5-way switch here is a replacement. You can see some of the kind of surrounding wiring is likely replacement from the same time period, but everything was done super well here. Everything looks correct. So aside from those very small emissions there, otherwise looking to be all original, and everything is checking out and is exactly what we want to see. Sometimes it just gets really tough with verifying originality. I'd always rather say something's not original and turn out that it is, than do the opposite and say something's original and then be misrepresenting it. Everything looks correct here. We're really getting into the weeds. Those are my honest observations. Now that we have this back together, let's talk about where this falls in compared to a lot of other Fender 62 reissue Stratocasters. Fender wasn't doing any reissues until 1982 officially. There is evidence to suggest that in 81, they were starting to manufacture these as well as the US vintage guitars right at the end of the year. But as far as official release goes, it wasn't until 82 that these guitars were offered, whether you were looking at the Japanese version for the Japanese market or the American-made version. I think these original reissues, whether the US vintage or the ST62, I think they're both actually really accurate to the original 62 Strats. Now, of course, these aren't one-to-one with the original 62 Strats, and within the Fender Japan lineage, as you kind of go down to the 65 model tier and 85 model tier, those kind of get a little bit further away, whereas this is the most accurate of the Japan reissues. I think that they're all great, and I think they all do a really good job of recreating that classic Strat from such a special year. Now, Fender Japan and Fender US are always going to be compared. They both have things that I think they do better than each other. Generally speaking, as far as production level instruments go, I've always found that the Fender Japan guitars have better fretwork, but then the Fender US guitars will have better pickups. So finding a guitar like this where you get the US pickups, but the Japan craftsmanship is a really great find. I think that this original version is about as good as it gets for Fender Japan. The reason I want to document this is because this is pretty much the benchmark. Any other Japan reissue that we get, we are pretty much going to be comparing to this, as well as a relevant 62 original vintage Stratocaster. I think as time has gone on and many different reissues have been made, whether with Fender Japan, Fender US, or even Fender Mexico, there's been a lot of really great ones. I think there's been a lot of really great ones that have been built to a specific price point. It's kind of become a game of telephone, not including custom shop in this when I say this. Some of the newer reissues maybe aren't as accurate as something like this, as this came out only 20 years after the original 62 Strat, whereas 62 Strat reissues made now, obviously quite a time discrepancy there. Still a lot of great ones being made today, but I think that this is probably a little more accurate to the original vintage ones. Through doing what we do here at the shop and traveling to different shops, different guitar shows, all that stuff, I have been lucky enough to play quite a few original 60 Strats from years like the 1962. And as far as reissues go, again, excluding custom shop, I think this is one of the most accurate that we've ever had. A lot of people do compare these 115 tiers to modern Fender custom shop guitars. I do think that's a relevant comparison. I kind of would put this in a kind of class with custom shop stuff. Later on, Fender Japan would also go on to make the X-Strat guitars and custom edition guitars, which is Fender Japan's custom shop. This kind of falls in with that as well. It's just a really, really top tier instrument. Now, finding an original 62 Strat will probably command in today's market about $30,000, if not more. The price of this is going to be a lot for a made in Japan Strat, like compared to some of the other examples. It's more in line with what you'd expect for a very entry-level Fender USA custom shop guitar. So this is gonna go for more than an American vintage and kind of right around what you'd see for a typical 62 reissue custom shop Strat today. I think that price is warranted. It is a lot. Fortunately, there's a lot of other great options that are half this price or even a third of this price. This is definitely for the person who wants to be indulgent and get the best that they had to offer from the first year of production. So there's definitely a bit of collectability factored into the price of something like this. If price point is the only thing that you're after, there's other stuff I could recommend. But if the historical relevance and everything else that goes into this is important to you, then I think these are definitely a worthy consideration. And while I don't like making these predictions, I'll say I would assume this is something that will hold its value, if not appreciate in the coming years as these become more and more celebrated. I hope you guys have enjoyed this dive into this guitar. Let me know if this is something you guys have enjoyed. For those of you out there who have played any 62 or 62 reissue Strats, let me know what your favorite ones are down below in the comments. I know for me, this is definitely a favorite. I also really like the Fender American Vintage series. Those are great as well. We appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out and watch as always. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and we will see you in another video soon. Bye.